All right, let's just jump right in. OpenAI has officially dropped GPT-5, and you know the hype is already turned up to 11. So today, we're going to cut through all that noise and figure out what is actually real. We're going to break down the new features, what this thing can really do, and, separate the genuine breakthroughs from the slick marketing.
And right here, this is the main event. This is the big promise from OpenAI's CEO. The claim is pretty simple. We've gone from GPT-4o, which felt like talking to a pretty sharp college kid, all the way to GPT-5. And this is supposed to be like having a PhD-level expert on call for, well, anything you can think of.
A PhD in my pocket? I love it. I hope it's ready for my questions about the really important stuff. Like the physics of why my toast always, and I mean always, lands butter side down. But seriously, is this little pocket PhD ready to be our go-to expert for everything? Or is it, kind of like an intern with a ridiculously good search engine? Exactly, and Altman really frames this as a clear step up in raw intelligence. He basically said GPT-3, that was your high schooler, had moments of brilliance, but was, a bit all over the place. GPT-4o was the college student, smarter, way more useful. And now GPT-5 is the PhD. That's a huge claim, so let's see what the evidence actually says.
Right. Talk is cheap, especially for an AI that can generate endless amounts of it. So let's get to the good stuff, the part that you can actually see. The live demos. What can this new model create when you put it on the spot? This is where we find out if the PhD can actually do the homework. And they kicked things off with a goal that was honestly super ambitious and really personal. This is OpenAI's Yann Dubois, and he asks GPT-5 to build him a whole web app from scratch just to help his partner learn French. The goal was so she could talk to his family. I mean, talk about pressure.
And poof, in just a few minutes, it spits out Midnight in Paris, a totally functional app. It had quizzes, flashcards, the whole deal. The speed is frankly kind of insane. But can we talk about the design for a second? A snake game where a mouse eats cheese to learn French. It's a little on the nose, don't you think? It's charming, for sure, but maybe not the height of Parisian cool.
But the scale of what it's doing is the real story here. In another demo, they wanted a visual for the Bernoulli effect, and GPT-5 just cranked out almost 400 lines of really complex code in about 2 minutes. A human developer said that same job could easily take a week.
Oh, it's impressive, 100%. But let me just play devil's advocate here. Imagine your boss just hands you 400 lines of code you've never seen before and says, hey, go find the bug. That's the other side of this whole instant app dream. The maintenance could be a total nightmare.
Okay, fair point. But it's not just about code. The jump in its creative writing and, dare I say, emotional depth is just as huge. They did this side-by-side test, asking both models to write a eulogy for the models that came before them. GPT-4o's response? It was called rather generic, like a template. But GPT-5's writing, now this is interesting. It had rhythm and beat, it felt personal, and it was more like you were talking to a friend with a really high IQ and EQ.
A high EQ friend, which is actually the perfect transition, because a huge part of this whole launch wasn't just about being smarter, it was about being more personal, more integrated, and, more empathetic. So is GPT-5 actually designed to feel more human?
Oh, it absolutely is. They're stacking a bunch of features together to create that exact feeling. First, the voice sounds way more natural. You can give it custom personalities, including a sarcastic one. Bria, I know you're going to love that. Second, it's got a better memory, so it can learn about you over time. And third, and this is a big one, it can get into your Gmail and Google Calendar. In the demo, it literally planned someone's day, found an email she forgot to answer, and even made a packing list for her trip just based on what it knew about her.
That calendar thing is a lot to process. But let's look at where this idea of being a thought partner gets really, really powerful. This is the story of Carolina Millen, and she used the AI for something way more important in scheduling meetings. She used it to try and understand her cancer diagnosis. And this is just a profound example. So Carolina gets her biopsy report, and it's just full of confusing medical terms. The older model, it helped translate it into plain English, which is great. But when they fed the same report to GPT-5,
it did something more. It didn't just translate words, it understood the context, the real question she was asking. It actually anticipated her next steps and suggested critical questions for her to ask her doctor. It became a true partner for her in a moment of absolute crisis. And that story just perfectly shows both the incredible upside and the massive risk here. On the one hand, this kind of tool can empower patients, help them advocate for themselves, and navigate a system that is just terrifyingly complex. But on the other hand, the risk of someone misinterpreting AI advice or the model just making something up, hallucinating, on a life or death topic, it's very real. Even OpenAI was clear. This is a tool to empower you, not to replace your doctor. You have to be careful.
Couldn't agree more. And that brings us to the fine print. With all this new power, you gotta ask, how is OpenAI handling safety? And maybe the bigger question for the 700 million people using this every week, who gets all this new brain power? And what's the catch?
Okay, so the big safety update is this new idea they're calling safe completions. Basically, it's a move away from that classic, super frustrating, I'm sorry, I cannot assist with that wall you sometimes hit. Now, if you ask about something sensitive but legitimate, like, say, the technical details of fireworks, instead of just saying no, the model tries to be helpful, but within safe limits. It might explain why it can't give you a step-by-step, but it'll point you to safety manuals or official guidelines. It's just a more nuanced way of doing things.
Okay, a more nuanced safety model, we can get behind that. But now, let's get to the question that's on everybody's mind. Who actually gets to play with this new PhD-level genius? And what's it going to cost me?
And honestly, this might be the biggest news from the entire announcement. For the very first time, the best, most advanced model is available to free users. Everyone gets to start with GPT-5. That's a huge deal. It puts the most powerful tool into literally everyone's hands. Whoa, hold on. Let's look a little closer. The magic words for free users are when you hit a limit. You get to use the top-tier GPT-5 times until you hit some kind of invisible cap, and then you get knocked down to a less powerful model. And how generous is that cap going to be? Well, that's the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? That really is the key question. So let's pull it all together. GPT-5 is obviously a massive leap forward in what these things can do. But what does it all add up to? And where do we go from here? And let's be super clear. While the demos are flashy and fun, this isn't just marketing fluff. The performance on the hardcore technical benchmarks is just mind-blowing. On Tower Square, which tests how well it uses other tools, it hit 97%. The old models topped out at 49%. And on coding tests, it's just smashing records. So that smarter promise? Yeah, the data backs it up. So here's the bottom line. The new model is smarter, you can see it in the numbers, it's more creative, you can see it in the writing, and it's designed to be a way more personal assistant. But all that personalization comes from it being woven more deeply into our digital lives than any AI we've ever seen. Which brings us to one last, pretty provocative thought to leave you with. We started with this idea of a PhD in your pocket. But when that PhD knows your schedule, when it has access to your most private emails, when it helps you think about your health and can even start to sound like you have to ask yourself, who's the real expert on you anymore? And that's a question we're all going to have to answer as we start using this thing.